Welcome everyone to this new Privacy Rules, PrivacyEspresso episode. In the episode of today, we are going to discuss the Cyber Resilience Act, actually under adoption under the EU Commission, that is extremely interesting for the effects that it may bring at the EU level and over it. And in order to discuss about it, we have invited Cannataci from the law firm Fenech Fenech from Malta. Sarah, welcome and thank you for being with us today, first of all.
Thank you, Alessandro, and thank you to Privacy Rules for the invitation. I agree with you that the Cyber Resilience Act is an extremely interesting topic, so exciting to be discussing it with you today.
Okay, great. So let's start immediately. First of all, what this act is and which are the key points of the proposal?
Yes, of course. So effectively, to give some context, when we're talking about the Cyber Resilience Act, what we need to bear in mind is that we're constantly using devices which are either connected devices or which have some sort of digital element, right? And this increased use of these devices also increases the risk of cybercrime. In fact, the global cost of cybercrime has increased exponentially. And in fact, in 2021, we're looking at a cost of 5.5 trillion euros. So that is the thing that we need to bear in mind, because the European Commission realized that this situation has left the public with a lack of understanding of using certain devices and also how secure these devices are. And across the board, we can say that there is quite a low level of cybersecurity in the products that are out there. So as a general rule, the main concept of the proposal as it is right now is that all products which have a digital element can only be made available on the EU market if they meet essential cybersecurity requirements that are set out within the proposal. Effectively, these requirements build on existing standards already, but they do introduce some new elements, whether it is inclusion of cybersecurity in the design of certain products and the development, exercising certain due diligence on security aspects, having, and this is a key part that is worrying the majority of people out there, is that in order to ensure standard level of cybersecurity on products offered in the market, all products with digital elements would need an EU declaration of conformity or an equivalent standard. And there are different ways that a manufacturer, and here we're talking about obligations on a manufacturer, can go about obtain this declaration of conformity. However, there are different methods applicable depending on the type of product. So there are products which are referred to as critical products with digital elements, which have a higher level of cybersecurity risk. In relation to those products, more extensive and onerous processes vis-a-vis obtaining the declaration of conformity need to be obtained. Effectively, the main obligations apply on manufacturers, obviously. However, there are also certain flow-down obligations on importers and distributors. The reason being that in truth, cybersecurity is a cross-border issue. So it can affect an organization from start to finish. It can affect a huge group of companies, and product that is manufactured either in the EU or outside of the EU, but is used in the EU then, so it's placed on the market within the EU, can obviously therefore have effects throughout all the EU member states. So that is really it. The main point is creating harmonization across the EU in terms of the standard of cybersecurity and the cyber resilience, right, of these products with digital elements.
Wonderful, Sarah. That's extremely interesting. I see these act as an instrument that will definitely raise awareness on cybersecurity at the EU level, as much as GDPR did under the data privacy perspective, let's say. So I see those two regulations. So maybe my next question would be, which is the interaction between GDPR and Cyber Resilience Act?
So one of the things one needs to think about in terms of the interplay between the GDPR and the CRA is that manufacturers must factor in cybersecurity in the design and the development of the products. And I think you will agree with me here that this is also reflective of the privacy by design and privacy by default principle that we have under the GDPR. In terms of interplay with the GDPR as well, one should note that the idea under the CRA is that you have continuous risk assessment. And this is something that we also find under the GDPR. when it comes to undertaking DPIAs or undertaking certain international data transfers. This is something that we find as well as a theme, continuous risk assessment. And lastly, and this is I think most important and tied to what you said vis-a-vis awareness, is that the idea is creating accountability. So all these different parties involved in making or bringing a product with digital elements on the market need to now be accountable for the cyber resilience of that product. And in fact, this is reflected in notification requirements that apply on manufacturers, importers, and distributors to the relevant authorities. Here, we're not talking about data protection authorities, but we're talking about the market surveillance authorities within the jurisdiction, notifying them that you are the entity that is responsible for this product. Besides that, and tied to accountability, is also the fact that there is, to an extent, record-keeping obligations. In fact, certain documentation, so information tied to the measures applied to the product to make sure that there is this standard of security, need to be maintained, particularly by the manufacturers, for a number of years. So it's 10 years after the placing on the market. When it comes to implementing corrective measures, the level of security effectively of the product with digital elements needs to be maintained either for the life cycle of the product or for a period of 5 years after the placing of that product on the market, whichever is shorter. So the level of accountability has increased immensely, and I think that is also reflective of the increase in accountability that we have post GDPR.
I totally agree with you, and thanks a lot also for this. And I see that this regulation is very aligned to GDPR already, so that's a good news definitely in terms of future implementation, and probably will go also to help companies covering certain activities that you need to know in terms of security to be compliant with one and the other regulation. So probably it may even simplify the work in order to understand what you have to do, because one of the main points with GDPR was, okay, it speaks about a certain level of security, but we don't know exactly what we would do. This kind of regulation probably can help in have a better understanding other than the guidelines that we have and
exactly.
all the rest. So absolutely a great point also on that. And speaking about these, you mentioned a duty to notify security incidents and activities like that. How does it work on that side?
So effectively, there's under the CRA, there is notification to the market surveillance authorities when it comes to placing certain products with digital elements on the market. There is the notification when it comes to vulnerabilities and security incidents, but that which is distinct to the data breach notification that we have under the GDPR needs to be made to ENISA within 24 hours. And this is additional to the data breach notification that we have under the GDPR. And that notification would be made to the relevant data protection authority. Well, I think it's relevant to mention is that in the process that has been undertaken at the EU Commission is that certain stakeholders, including BlackBerry, had notified in their feedback to the European Commission saying that this additional notification can also be seen as a tool for notification fatigue effectively, because if there is some sort of incident or vulnerability tied to that product, we're looking at a notification under the CRA to ENISA within 24 hours. If it falls within the scope of the NIS2 regulation there, then there's also a notification that needs to be done within the scope of that regulation. If it's a data breach within the context of GDPR, another data breach there. And also, obviously, additional notifications that can come out of other regulations. Perhaps one last thing is the fines. Under the CRA, we have quite high fines as well. However, the CRA has almost a classification system of the amount of fines that can be given out depending on type of breach. So the law goes further than the GDPR. And then, very important, because here we're trying to add accountability, transparency, right? If manufacturers, importers, or distributors provide incorrect, incomplete, or misleading information to the authorities, there is also another fine that can be handed out, which I think is quite serious.
Quite a lot. Yeah. But I can hear that there is, let's say, a step forward, because one of the main issues that was open with GDPR was that there were too much flexibility for the authorities in providing fines. So it's evident that they are now giving more direct indication in order to know what to expect and what can happen. At the same time, under the cybersecurity side, there are additional requirements that makes it quite difficult to handle. That's why my advice would be go to a lawyer that helps you, be prepared to all of this, because in most of the cases, be already prepared is the only way to then manage situations like this. So I invite all our listeners to contact you, Sarah, for any additional support in this regard. Thank you again for being with us and our listeners. I really look forward to meeting you with the next Privacy Espresso. So bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.